Right, so for the students who attended last week, okay, what have we covered? Do you all still remember? Okay, for the students who have attended last week, okay, what have you all covered last week? Quickly type out. I want to end also. This is my last class of the week. I just promised someone to end early, okay, but if not, okay, we probably end at 3 something if you like. Okay, DDSS. Okay, which aspect of DDSS did we cover? Okay, specific is terrific. DDSS, yes, DDSS. Everybody knows what's DDSS, right? But what aspect of DDSS was covered? One each, quick. Hey, Zach. Hey, thanks. Hey, what about Joanne? Hey, Elijah. Hey, what was covered last week? Don't tell me DDSS again, If not, the pen will fly through the screen and hit your face. If you find that I'm in a good mood, it's probably because this is the last class of and I'm also looking forward. I also had a long week. Factors and diagram. Yeah, we last week we did a recap on Egypt and web pigs. Okay, we also covered diagrams, movement along the curves. Okay, movement along the curve is a price factor, right? Okay, what about Joanne? Okay, what have we covered last week? Okay, can you type out something? If you want to unmute, sure, fine. Okay, shifts in demand and supply. Okay, so let's do a quick recap. So last week we actually went through the G's of part 1, which was the following week. So for the viewers out there, okay, if you missed out last week's clip, okay, make sure you check the card that I've inserted on top. Okay, and you will catch up with the demand and supply part 2. Okay, so we have covered the diagram part, okay, the determinants and all this, but more importantly, okay, we have covered what and how much to produce. Do you still remember? Okay, what and how much to produce, okay, is used specifically, okay, when we are illustrating the 3 problems, okay, that arises from scarcity. Okay, what and how much to produce, for whom to produce. Okay, especially for what and how much to produce, okay, we use the concept of SIR. Right, SIR, if you refer to the book, okay, page 8. Okay, is this English gentleman here? Okay, SIR is signaling, incentivizing, and rationing. Okay, so this is a very common question, okay, especially once you have learned market failure. Okay, so they'll ask you about efficient allocation of resource. Okay, and the opposite will be inefficient allocation of resource. Okay, so it will be a essay question on a 1-2 combination. So the part A, they'll ask you, okay, how do we use the price mechanism to address the problem of scarcity, for instance. Okay, yeah, so I expected to illustrate what and how much to produce, for whom to produce, and how to produce. So what and how much you'll be using signaling and incentivizing. Okay, I hope you guys still recall. Okay, and for rationing, okay, we'll be using it to address for whom. Okay, ineffective and the effective demand. Okay, so if you have missed that out, please catch up with last week's clip. And I also did an introduction on total expenditure and total revenue, right? Yes. Okay, on identifying the area, okay, between your price and your quantity. That will be your spending and your revenue. So today we'll be leveraging on this again. Okay, so this will be the foundation block, okay, for a upcoming concept known as firm's pricing decision. Okay, so I want you all to pay attention to this. Okay, we also covered concepts of price reduction policies. Right? Okay, so what are the policies that can reduce your price using the price adjustment process? Okay, reducing of demand, increasing of your supply, okay, or subsidizing, okay, a substitute, okay, which involves both supply and demand. Right, so all this has been covered in great depth last week, so I'm not going to touch on that. Okay, today I want to touch on a new topic, and the new topic stems from today's topic. Okay, so it's all extension. So remember, Okay, whatever that you do day in, day out matters. Okay, your earlier foundation must be there. Alright, so I don't think I need a quick show of hands. Okay, for my first year students in this class, you probably haven't covered PED and PES yet. Okay, the rest are second year students. Yeah, I may be wrong, okay, but but for my first year students, if you have covered price elasticity, okay, please let me know. Type it out on the chat. Okay, from my understanding, haven't yet. Yeah, my second year students will know this. Okay, so with this, I'm going to kickstart today's objective. Today we'll be covering price elasticity of demand and price elasticity of supply. So in short, I will call this PED and PES. PED and PES. Following me? Okay, so I will be using PED and PES. I will not be spelling out in full. So there are several objectives, but I want to focus on the ones that we'll be covering today. Okay, so we'll be looking at the definition and measurement of PED. Okay, shapes and magnitude of PED. Determinants of PED. Okay, and after that, we'll flip the entire first 3 points to address PES. Okay, and item 7 is an overview of PED and PES. Right? Item 8, 9, 10, okay, they are the exam usage. Okay, so you have to focus on this 3, okay, for exam practicality purpose. So the first 7 objectives are for concept. Okay, and the last 3 is to apply the concepts, okay, for exam purpose. So you got to know when to use. Okay, and 11 onwards will be covered next week. Okay, they are all more advanced things. Okay, so there are a lot of things that stems from PED and PES. Okay, so please spend time on this topic. It's really, really important. Okay. So having said that, okay, let's move on to today's topic. Okay, so I'd like you guys to refer to your book, page 11 and page 12. Okay, I'm going to introduce you guys the definition. Okay, so for the viewers out there, if you don't know what book we are referring to, okay, this is the guidebook that we use in class. Okay, it's called Economics in Minutes. Alright, so we have these 2 definitions that we'll be looking at. So I'm going to point out some of the common mistakes that are actually been abused by the second year students, and they didn't get away with that. Okay, so PED, price elasticity of demand. Okay, you want to talk about the degree of your responsiveness of quantity demanded. So this is the first keyword, quantity demanded. Okay, with respect to changes in its own price, ceteris paribus. Okay, so the first keyword down here, quantity demanded. Okay, it is not demand. Okay, so last week or the last 2 weeks, we have covered the difference between demand and quantity demanded, right? Quantity demanded is a price factor. Demand is a non-price factor. So today we'll be looking extensively into price factors. Okay, price factor, not non-price factor. Okay, and on top of that, we will be looking at the concept of ceteris paribus. So for the second year students who recently attended a lecture test, okay, I believe I've written your script. Okay, a lot of you guys omitted ceteris paribus. When you omit ceteris paribus, I will omit your mark. Okay, ceteris paribus. All things remains the same. So with that, okay, this is the definition. Okay, and the formula will be as follows. Okay, this is how we measure PED. You want to identify the percentage change. Okay, sometimes when I write fast, I don't spell it out. I use triangle. Triangle means change. Okay, we are looking at the responsiveness of your quantity demanded with respect to changes in its own price, ceteris paribus. Okay, so I'm going to go through the whole idea behind elasticity. Okay, because a lot of second year students they're just blindly memorizing elasticity, without understanding why you're studying that. Okay, even when I was a student like you guys, I also didn't really appreciate elasticity. Okay, it took me when I reached tertiary level, then I realized, oh, it is elasticity. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly illustrate how why do we need to know that. Okay, so with that, I am going to move on to shapes and magnitude. Okay, so before that, I'm going to repeat the formula here. Okay, so please be patient, join me. we're looking at the percentage change in your quantity demanded with response to percentage change in your own price ceteris paribus. So in a nutshell, okay, we are concerned whenever there is a price change. Remember the keyword here is elastic. It's supposed to be like a rubber band, right? So what does a rubber band does? Yeah, a rubber band actually allows you to stretch, right? Okay, so we are concerned about how far your quantity demanded can be stretched with every given change in your price level. Okay, so the keyword here is change. Okay, so change can be up or down. You have to get the direction right. Okay, so with this, I'm just going to use some simple hypothetical value here. So let's say when there is an increase in 1% of price of a good, okay, in the denominator. Okay, we are concerned about how the numerator responds. Okay, so if the numerator responds by a more than 1% increase, okay, more than 1% decrease. Okay, I'll emphasize on the word decrease. Okay, so when there's an increase in 1% of price, your quantity demanded responded or fall more than 1%. Okay, this is what we call elastic. Okay, your price elasticity of demand is price elastic. Okay, demand is price elastic. Okay, price elastic. Okay, give me a second. Okay, demand is price elastic. Okay, likewise, okay, if we have the opposite, if there's an increase in 1% of the price, but quantity demanded for less than 1%, less than 1% decrease, okay, we can conclude that your demand is price inelastic. Okay, your quantity demanded does not respond much to price changes. Okay? So in terms of magnitude, okay, I'm going to show you in page 12, okay, which are the range that you got to be concerned. Okay, so these two are hardly tested. You can cross them out if you have a book. It doesn't mean that they are wrong. It means that they are hardly tested. Okay, so I want you guys to highlight the range. Okay, so you want to highlight these two. PED is lesser than 1 and PED is greater than 1. Okay, so and now let's go back to the formula. Okay, we are in the midst of deriving that. So if we were to deduce that when there's an increase in 1% of your price, but your numerator falls more than 1%, okay, your PED has to be greater than 1. So far, is everyone following me? Simple mathematics, right? When the denominator goes up 1%, okay, the numerator goes down by more than 1%, it has to be greater than 1. The opposite will also hold true. Okay, when the numerator is lesser than the denominator. Okay? So a few key things. Okay, we realize that there is an opposing force in direction here. Okay, one goes up, the other goes down. Do you all see that? But why are we stating the positive value here? Why? Okay, so for simplicity, okay, because of law of demand. Law of demand states that price and quantity demanded are inversely related. So when there's an increase in price, quantity demanded must go down. Okay, so for your PED values, they are all negative. All negative, okay, but for simplicity purpose, we normally take the modulus. Okay, that's why it becomes positive. So in case studies, when you are supposed to calculate PED, okay, it is always a good habit to reflect the negative side to show that this is the inverse relationship between price and quantity. Okay, is everyone clear so far? So this is what happens when you see in your notes that all the negative sign has been eliminated because they take the modulus, period. Because everything will be negative. So far, have we gotten the magnitude right? Hannah? Okay, so greater than 1 means that responsive to price change, like a rubber band can stretch. Okay, lesser than 1 means not very responsive to price change. Okay, very rigid. So from a diagram perspective, these are the two things that I want them to sink into your head. Okay, so when you are supposed to illustrate demand is price elastic or inelastic, I will be asking you the shape in the future. When I ask you the shape, I'm asking you about the slope of your demand curve. We know that demand curve is downward sloping. Okay, so today our focus is on the slope and the gradient of the demand curve. We are not concerned about shifting of the demand curve. Is everyone clear? Okay, so how does your demand curve slope, although it's downward sloping? Okay, so one of them must be gentle and one of them must be steep. Okay, so which one is going to be gentle and which one is going to be steep? Elastic is going to be gentle or steep? Right? Okay, so it has to be gentle and steep. So I'm going to show you guys a hypothetical illustration. Okay, so price and quantity. Okay, I'm going to map it to the right hand side as well. Okay, so let's assume that they start from the same point. Right? So with a slight increase in your price, for instance, from P0 to P, it actually works both ways. Okay, in this case, I will show you guys the downward part. Okay, let's say if price reduced from P0 to P1. Okay, let me extend. Okay, I'm running out of space. Okay, we can see that the magnitude of your price falling is the same, right? Agreed? Now, I want you guys to observe the effects on quantity demanded. So now, my question to you is, under which diagram, will you experience a greater increase in your quantity demanded? The elastic or the inelastic? Which diagram? Both experience a same increase or same fall in price. Okay, but under which diagram do you experience a greater increase in quantity demanded? Okay, you see that the one on the left side, elastic, with a given fall in price, your quantity demanded increase more than proportion. Likewise, if you look at the one on the right, with a given fall in price, your quantity demanded increase less than proportion. So far, so good? So I want you all to focus on the effects of these. How does your quantity demanded respond? So like I've said, we are focusing on movement. Right? So with a given increase in price, the reverse will also hold true. Okay? So now we only show one way only. The other way also holds true. So in a nutshell, I want you all to note that for elastic, we are looking at flat, gentle demand curve. For inelastic, we are looking at steep demand curve. So these two must automatically come to you. And the magnitude as well. Clear so far? So if you have any questions for me, please type it out. If not, I'm going to move on to what affects your PED value. How can your PED change? So this is widely tested in case studies. So with that, I'm going to move on to our first acronym that we are going to learn today. Let's look at page 12, everyone. Proportion of income spent, availability of substitutes, nature of goods, and time period. So collectively, I will know this as PANT. So the next time when I ask what framework are we going to use, okay, for PED, it will be PANT. It's just like demand curve. We're using Egypt. Okay, that affects, okay, the direction of your demand shifting. Okay, for PANT down here, we are looking at what affects the gradient and what affects the value of your PED. Is everyone clear? So I don't want to hear PANT alone. I want you guys to be able to identify which alphabet is in place, okay, from the case study. So I'll go through one by one. I'll be very patient. Okay, I know that some of you, okay, have not experienced this before. Okay, so the first one is proportion of income spent. Okay, so remember, whenever you are trying to deduce the determinants yourself, it always pays off to tell a story. Okay, and always use polarity as an example. What is polarity? Meaning to say, okay, one is south, one is north. Okay, they're the exact opposite. Okay, so name me one good that takes up a very small proportion of your income, of your pocket money. What do you normally spend on, and what is one good that you spend on that actually takes up a very small proportion of your, okay, drinks, junk food. I think the year twos are traumatized by the the lecture test, right? All right, let's look at drinks. For instance, if you buy drinks from school canteen, okay, you realize that when the amount of drinks, okay, when they increase by 10%, right? Let's say from $1 to $1.10, increase by 10%. Okay, would you be very sensitive to price changes? Not exactly, right? Because it takes up a very small proportion of your income. But we cannot say the opposite for the others. Okay, so if you realize that if you are looking to buy an iPhone, okay, it costs a few $100s, right? And when it goes up by 10%, it's going to take up an even bigger proportion of your income. Okay, absolute terms, agreed? And this leaves you with lesser residual income to buy other goods if you buy iPhone. So, okay, you are going to respond more, okay, or rather, okay, you are going to cut your consumption of iPhone, okay, more than proportion, okay, when there is an increase in price. So this is what I mean. Okay, you have to look out for small ticket item and huge ticket item. Huge ticket item, when they take up a disproportionately large amount of your income, you are going to be very sensitive to price change. Okay, especially when there's an increase. Okay, you're going to cut back on your consumption, your quantity demanded sharply. Okay, so in a nutshell, when it takes up a small proportion of your income, PED is price inelastic. If it takes up a lot of your income, then you're going to be very responsive to price change. Okay? So this one, okay, I'm going to point out which are the three alphabets that are widely tested. Okay, PAN, okay, they are widely tested. Okay, in case studies. So you have to be able to deduce how does your PED value, okay, reflect, okay, based on whatever circumstance that you are given. Okay, and how does it affect your slope of your demand curve? So the next example, or the next alphabet that I want to go through, is availability of substitute. Right? So now tell me, okay, what is one good that doesn't have a lot of substitute? And what is one good that has a lot of substitute? Offhand is quite hard to think, right? Offhand. But are there any ready examples? Remember, it's a test of your examples. The more examples you can use, okay, the better you will learn. Have or not? Okay, cigarettes is actually better for nature of good. Okay, actually better for nature of good. But it can also be used as available substitutes as well. Okay, but let's try another example. meat. Alright, so you probably want to consider okay, normal bubble tea. Okay, and I don't know, 吃茶三千. Are you all familiar with 吃茶? Are you familiar with that? Right? So we know that one of them has won what's that? The Michelin star, right? 吃茶, Michelin star. I don't know whether you guys tasted before. Okay, but there is a special element. Okay, they are specifically brewed. Okay, with actual tea leaves. Okay, that's what they market as lah, right? Okay, as compared to normal bubble tea shops. So how does it affect your price elasticity of demand? So let's say if you are a mama shop, bubble tea shop, right? Hey, mama shop or a very generic bubble tea shop. What happens when you increase your price? What would you expect your quantity demanded to happen when you start raising your price? Do you expect it to fall more or fall less than proportion? For more, right? Why? Okay, because once you start raising price, okay, your consumers will go to other shops, right? Okay, so they will be more responsive to price changes. PED will be greater than 1. But on the other hand, you see that okay, brands like 吃茶, they can afford to raise price without experiencing a significant drop in the quantity demanded. Why? Because they have a strong brand value, right? Okay, they have 1 Michelin star. Which are the other bubble tea shops that have a Michelin star? Don't have, right? Then in that case, when there is an increase in price, quantity demanded or consumers are not going to be responsive to price changes. Okay, a bit more expensive, never mind. You cannot get Michelin star bubble tea. Okay, speaking of which, I'm getting very thirsty. Maybe later I'll go and order bubble tea. Okay, so far so good. So for nature of good, I'm going to move on to the third one. Okay, there are 2 categories that you want to consider. So some schools use nature of good, some schools use degree of necessity. Up to you. Okay, so there are 2 subcategories. Okay, so you want to look at necessities and habitual forming good. So these 2 are loosely parked under N. Okay, so just now someone brought up cigarettes, right? So you realize that cigarettes, alcohol, okay, all these goods, okay, they are habitual forming. Okay, and when they start to form a habit, okay, it leaves the consumer, okay, very hard to get rid of the habit. Agreed? And when such consumption habits fall into place, do you think consumers will be sensitive to price changes when they start to be reliant on a good? They won't be anywhere sensitive, right? Okay, if you want to raise $1, $2, okay, you can raise as much as you like. Okay, so long as it is a habitual forming good, okay, you are going to be less sensitive to price changes. Okay, so PED is normally inelastic, okay, for habitual forming good. So this is why I say that goods like cigarette is better for nature of good, to illustrate under here. But it's not wrong to say that they have no substitutes. It's not wrong because there's no substitute for cigarette. Nicotine patch, maybe. Yeah, so you can look at things. You can look at the determinants in totality, or you can look at them by individual basis. Most of the time they're related. Okay, I'm going to move on to the necessity part. Necessity is fairly straightforward. Okay, things you use on a daily basis. Okay, it's also related to habitual in the sense that you're using it out of habit. Okay, but for habitual goods, okay, they are normally what we call sin goods. Okay, I'm so sorry, I blocked this. Sin goods. Sin means what? Means something that is not good, right? Okay, whereas for necessities, okay, it is not necessarily sin goods. Things that you consume on a daily basis, like rice, noodle, for instance. Okay, all these are going to be of great necessity. So you're not going to be very sensitive to price changes. Okay, as compared to non-necessity or non-essential. Non-essential, you're probably very sensitive to price changes because you don't need to buy them. Okay, so this is how you play around with the alphabet N. Is everyone clear? So every time when I quiz you, you have to quickly tell me which alphabet and what is the magnitude of your PED. Okay, and what is the equivalent slope of your demand curve. So time period here is hardly tested, but when it comes out, make sure you're able to break up into short run and long run. Okay, and in short run, okay, your PED is normally price inelastic. Long run price elastic. So it's also related to the earlier factors, like for instance, habitual forming good. Right? In the short run, you probably cannot cultivate a habit, okay, to replace your cigarette smoking. Agreed? Is there any hacks around removing a cigarette or alcoholism? Not really, right? But in the long run, if you go for therapy, if you go for treatment, if you go for whatever, you can replace, okay, the habit, okay, of consuming a good. Then it's going to be elastic in the long run. Okay, you are going to, when there's an increase in price, you can cut down your quantity demanded significantly. In the short run, okay, you are held hostage. So it's a lot about consumer pattern, okay, for time period. So far, is everyone so good, okay, of deducing the magnitude of PED? Yeah, always tell a story between the two. Okay, so I am going to move on to PES. Is everyone good with PED already? Can I move on to PES? So if you understood PED, PES will be the same, okay, in terms of how we are going to approach them. Right? And PES is, I don't know, some of the students find it easier, some of the students find it a bit more complex. Okay, we'll see how it goes. Maybe you guys give me a feedback later. Right? But we do know that PES is definitely got to do with your supply curve. Right? So now let's hop into the definition. So we are looking at the degree of responsiveness of your quantity supplied. Remember, we are not concerned about wet peaks factor here. It's not a SS factor. We are concerned about price factors. To changes in its own price, ceteris paribus. Alright, so the two things we want to be concerned about is quantity supplied and ceteris paribus. And for the formula, okay, it will be pretty much the same as your PED. Okay, it's just that there is one word that's changed. Instead of quantity demanded, we are looking at quantity supplied. Okay, likewise, I'll be using the delta sign down here to illustrate changes and ceteris paribus. Okay. So I'll probably derive the PES, okay, using the formula, okay, and we'll go step by step from there. For now, okay, let's take the definition for good here. Okay, I'm just going to quickly repeat what is PES here. Okay, please join me if you. So PES is tabulated with your percentage change in your quantity supplied with response to changes in its own price, ceteris paribus. Right? So what story can we draw from PED? Okay, we know that, okay, we are concerned about slope, right? PED, we are concerned about gentle and flat, right? Gentle and steep. PES is more or less the same. Okay, but we are concerned about the slope of your supply curve. So now let's deduce the magnitude first. Okay, so for instance, okay, if there's a given increase in 1% of the price of the good, okay, we are concerned about how is your quantity demanded going to respond. Okay, if your quantity supplied, If your quantity supply is going to increase by more than 1%, 1% is hypothetical. Okay, I'm just stating a simple illustration. Okay, your PES will be greater than 1. The contrary also holds true when there's an increase in 1% of price, but if your quantity supply increase lesser than 1%, then PES will be price inelastic. Okay, so this is simple mathematics. All you need to plug is the numerator and denominator. If the numerator is higher than the denominator, it will be greater than 1. Okay, the opposite holds true. So how can we tell a story here? Let's focus on the one on the right. Okay, we see that when there's an increase in 1% of the price, but your quantity supplied responds more than proportion, we can deduce that okay, your supply is price elastic. It responds to price changes. Okay, likewise, if your PES is lesser than 1, for every increase in your price, your production is not very responsive to price changes. Your quantity supply is very rigid, inelastic, cannot respond to price changes. Alright, so far so good. So from a diagram perspective, it mirrors the what we have covered earlier on. Okay, elastic, inelastic. Oh, I forgot. Okay, PES is always positive. Okay, does anyone know why is it always positive? Why is it always positive? Okay, law of supply, right? So your price and your quantity supplied, they are positively related. Okay, I covered this earlier on under law of supply. Okay, so there's no need to mod them. Okay, so some of the students, they get confused and anyhow mod. Alright, so I just want you all to refer to the book again. Okay, let's look at page 13. So these are the two, I'm going to highlight the things that are important. Okay, PES, these two values are hardly tested. Okay, so you can cross them out. Okay, I want you to highlight okay, this range. Lesser than 1 and greater than 1. Okay, these are the two range that we are concerned about. Okay, you realize that Mr. Teo like to build things from scratch, right? I like to draw things. Okay, I'm a creator, that's why I don't like to use the book too often. I use the book okay, to sum up things easier. Alright, so back to the shape of the diagram, the gradient of your supply curve. So we know that supply curve is upward sloping. Okay, but how does it slope upwards? What are the two words that I emphasized earlier on? Can you all type out now? Okay, how should we be concerned about the gradient of the supply curve? What are the two words? Okay, gentle and steep, flat or steep. So if your PES is greater than 1, is price elastic, how should your supply curve look? Gentle or steep? Sloping upwards. Okay, it should be gentle. It's all relative, gentle and steep. Okay, so let's go through a simple hypothetical illustration again. Okay, so we can see that okay, this is the initial price and quantity combination of the elastic curve. Okay, and when we map it to the right hand side, it's the same. So what are we supposed to find out here? Okay, so when there's a given increase in price, okay, we want to find out the responsiveness of your quantity supply, right? Do you see that? Okay, so a given increase in price, your quantity supply okay, is going to respond differently for the two different diagrams. Okay, so we can see that the diagram on the left is going to be more responsive to price changes. Okay, your production can increase more for every given increase in price. The one on the right, not very responsive to price changes, a bit rigid. Okay, so whenever you illustrate, okay, if you want to show, okay, the polarities, okay, expect if you want to draw two diagrams, make sure your gradient is significant enough. If you want to show elastic, make sure it's flat enough. If you want to show inelastic, make sure it's steep enough. Regardless, is it PED or PES. Okay, it's going to have lasting effects on your answer quality. Later on, we'll see in the practice question. Okay, so make a mental note. Okay, must play around with the gradient. But don't make it perfectly inelastic or perfectly elastic. Okay, because these two has no very little exam value. So far, is everyone good? Alright, I am going to move on, okay, to the determinants of PES. Okay, so likewise, earlier on, what was the acronym that I shared with you all? Can you all recall? What was the acronym? Without looking at the book, look at Mr. Teo. Some of you are very smart. Okay. Okay, I'm not, I forget it, never mind. But, okay, what was the acronym that I shared earlier on? Quickly. The earlier one. Okay, if you're looking at PED, we are concerned about PANT. Okay, if you're looking at PES, then we're looking at MINTS, mints. Mints. Okay? So, how are we going to make sense out of this? Always tell a story with polarity. Okay, and we are going to go through one by one. Before that, I want to point out which are the ones that are important. Okay, you will probably see I, N, and S tested quite a lot, especially I and S, I and S. T and M, okay, maybe M also. T normally they don't test. So far so good. Okay, so after this we'll go for a break. So, factor mobility. Okay, what do we mean by factor mobility? Okay, what is factor? Factor means what? Your factor of production, right? Agreed? So, what are the factor of productions that we are still concerned about that we know? Remember, I covered this in the very first lesson, right? Okay, what are the resources? Okay, what? Land, labor, capital, okay, and entrepreneurship. So let's consider these two scenarios. Okay, we have, okay, a producer producing Apple phones and a producer producing Samsung phones. Okay, what can we conclude about the nature of the production? Quite similar, right? Okay, they share the same equipment. Machinery is not too different, right? Agreed? You all agree with that? Okay, so when there is an increase in price of Apple phones, okay, do you think the production is going to be price elastic or inelastic for Apple phones? Okay, given that, okay, we can easily pull Samsung machineries to produce Apple phones. Okay, if we can allocate resource from Samsung production to produce Apple phones, knowing that they share very similar capabilities, then your Apple phones are going to be price elastic. They are going to be responsive to price changes. Okay, so this is a perspective from, okay, a capital good. Okay, it can also work for labor. Okay, so when you look at labor, we are looking at skill set. For instance, okay, if you're looking at price of healthcare, right? Why is PES of healthcare inelastic? Okay, from the perspective of factor mobility. Why? Okay, because let's say if Mr. Teo wants to go into healthcare, okay, I need to undergo 6 years of rigorous training, right? To become a doctor. Okay, I don't have the skill set. Okay, there is factor immobility. Okay, therefore, okay, the price of your healthcare, okay, when there's increase in price of healthcare, quantity supply is not going to change a lot. So this is the reason, okay, from the labor perspective. If you ask Mr. Teo to flip burgers, to go to KFC, go to McDonald's, go and be a cashier anytime, right? Even you guys can also do the same. Okay, so when there's an increase in price of fast food, okay, your supply is going to increase more, quantity supply is going to increase more than proportion. Okay, relative to healthcare. Are you guys following this example? This perspective of factor of production, skill set? Yeah, this is important, huh? Okay, so from the perspective of, okay, I'm going to go through again here using the example. Okay, we can see that just now the example that I used was healthcare. Okay, and fast food. Okay, so for Mr. Teo, okay, let's say if I want to do a career switch to healthcare, then in that case, we realize that because of factor immobility, even though there's an increase in prices of healthcare, quantity supply is not going to increase a lot. Okay, but okay, the opposite holds true. Okay, for production that has very low barriers to entry. Okay, fast food. Okay, I'm going to quickly move on. Okay, to the next one. Okay, of inventory and stocks. Okay, so please copy this down. Okay, whatever that I mentioned, okay, please don't listen here and go out from the other side. You guys have to learn to take notes. That's why I have the book. Okay, and the book, okay, is concise. Okay, so you have to learn to take things that is going to matter. Okay, so for inventory and stocks, okay, there's a concept that you need to know. Okay, it is perishable and non-perishable. Okay, please jot this down. So can you name me one good that has the perishable and the non-perishable variation? Okay, good. Okay, we have someone brought canned food, right? So we can look at what? Fresh fish and canned fish. One type of food, two different variation. So which one is more perishable? Fresh fish or canned fish? Which one is more perishable? This one is probably easier to get. Okay, fresh fish is more perishable, right? So if the good is highly perishable, can the producer afford to keep a lot of stocks? Cannot, right? Why? You keep ready, it becomes stale. Okay, it will spoil. So now let's go back to the diagram. So from the perspective of a fresh fish, if we cannot keep a lot of stock, what can we conclude about the PES value? Is it elastic or inelastic? Do they respond to price changes? For a fishmonger, when there's an increase in price, do you think they can step up on their production of fresh fish readily? Cannot, right? Why? Because okay, you only have limited stocks. You cannot have too much fresh fish on hand. Okay, therefore, it's going to be the diagram on the right. If it is canned fish, no problem. Well, canned tuna, canned mackerel, canned salmon, canned whatever. You can hold a gazillion of stocks. Okay, in your backyard. Okay, in your storeroom. Right. So when there's an increase in price, okay, producers can readily increase the quantity supply. Okay, so it will fall under the illustration on the left. Okay, for non-perishable goods. So pay attention to these. Perishable and non-perishable concepts are widely tested. Okay, for PES. Okay, make sure you're able to state the value, whether is it inelastic, do they respond well, or do they not respond well. Alright, so for number of sellers here, we are looking at number of sellers at the given time period. Okay, at the given time period. Okay, so at a given time period, okay, how does producers respond to price changes? Okay, so let's say if at a given time period, okay, there is only one producer producing a specific good. Okay, then we can conclude that your PES is going to be inelastic. Okay, if there's only one producer. Okay, they are not responsive to price changes. But if there are many producers at a given time period, then they are likely to be categorized on the diagram on the left. It's elastic because there are many producers out there. For every given increase in price, okay, quantity supply is going to respond more than proportion. Okay, so this is how you want to play with number of sellers at a given time period for PES. All right, time period. Okay, we can also have two perspectives here. The first perspective is the easier approach. We can look at agricultural goods. Okay, agricultural goods. Okay, we are looking at how fast you can produce agricultural goods. Right? So, for instance, if we look at durian, okay, in the short run and in the long run, okay, what can we conclude about the PES size? Remember, time period is always short run and long run. Huh? What can we conclude about the PES size? Okay, in the short run, okay, we realize that PES is going to be more inelastic. Okay, whatever goods that you are going to be producing for agricultural goods is going to be inelastic. Why? Because producers cannot increase their production, okay, if you give them 1 day. Okay, do you think you can grow durian 1 day and the next day you harvest into a durian fruit? Unlikely, right? Okay, but in the long run, you realize that producers can respond to price changes. Okay, so the whole idea behind this is a seasonal effect, right? So in the short run, okay, producers, because of insufficient time to cultivate the fruit or the crop, okay, PES is going to be inelastic. Okay, they're not going to be responsive to price changes. Okay. The harder approach requires us to look at firms and decision. So this one, okay, for my second year students, you probably will get it a bit quicker. Okay, so for firms and decision, for short run, I could put F and D here. Okay, under short run and long run, it's the same. Short run, PES is lesser than 1. Long run, PES is greater than 1. Okay, so the whole idea behind this, when I go into firms and decision, I will cover this in depth. Okay, we will be looking at the concept of fixed factor of production and variable factor of production, VFOP and FFOP. So in the long run, all your factor of productions are variable. Okay, in the short run, one of your factor of production must be fixed. Okay, and therefore, okay, you have issues responding to price changes. Is everyone good so far? I'm going to move on to the last one, then we go for a break. Okay, the last one is fairly simple. It's a concept of spare capacity. My second year students will probably get a lot from me, okay, when we cover AD and AS. So spare capacity, we are looking at the concept of what we call utilization rate, okay, of your production resources. UR, I call this UR in short. So let's say you have a plant, you have a factory, right? Okay, and your resources, your machineries and your workers, okay, they are utilized 10% of the time. Okay, as compared to utilized 90% of the time. Okay, which one is more busy? 90% of the time or 10% of the time? Which production is more busy? So if your resources are utilized 90% of the time, they are going to be more busy. Agreed? So if they are going to be more busy, okay, it simply means that you have very little resource to respond to future price changes. Because your machineries, your workers are already overworked. Okay, you do not have spare capacity. Okay, and therefore you are not responsive to price changes. You cannot step up your production as and when you like. Okay, but for a factory that is mainly idle at 10%, do you see that? 10% means that a lot of your machineries and workers are not working. 1 second. Then you can afford to use the remaining 90% of your idle resources. So when there's every given increase in price, quantity supply will increase more than proportion. Okay, so this is what I mean by PES is price elastic. Okay, for spare capacity. Okay, so if you have spare capacity, PES is going to be elastic. If you don't have spare capacity in your production, PES is going to be price inelastic. Clear? Alright, okay, I will move on to a break. Okay, anytime that you have questions for me, please ask me. Okay, if not, I will see you in a short while. Alright, when you're back, please turn on your webcam. Thank you. Oh, say hi. Hello. Hi, hello. Oh yeah. You know, yesterday or the day before, we were so concerned. Okay, I put her down first. Okay, say bye bye. Bye bye to Spadin. Bye bye. Say bye. Bye. Bye bye. Go. Go. So a side story was I was playing fetch with her on Friday. And I think she kind of knocked herself on the wall, you know, too too serious with playing fetch. Then she was limping. The whole night she was limping on her front paw. Yeah, I thought she fractured her paw or something. So got me so concerned. That Saturday we sent her to the vet. I mean, thank God it was nothing serious, but wow, my heart nearly sank when she was limping around. Okay, but anyway, okay, sorry for digression. Okay, for the viewers out there, okay, that's my dog. Okay, if you keep hearing someone somewhere barking, okay, that's her. Alright, so I'm just going to do a quick summary, okay, of the two PES and PED values that we have learned. Okay, so for PED, okay, this is the summary illustration. Okay, so sometimes we'll be using this diagram. When we use this diagram, okay, we are contrasting the effects on the quantity demanded, okay, with a same change in price. So the diagram illustration is pretty much the same as what I've shown you earlier on here. Okay, it's the same, just that okay, I split them up. Okay, so now I put them together. Okay, so this is the effects of putting them together. Okay, so we can see that both of them will start from the same intersection, Q0. Give me a second, let me close the door. Okay, and when there's a given increase in price, you realize that the quantity demanded will respond in different magnitude. Okay, depending on the slope of your demand curve. If it's inelastic, it will fall lesser. Elastic, it will fall more. Okay, and the opposite also holds true. Okay, we can see that PES is the same concept. Okay, they will start from the same intersection of P0 and Q0. Okay, with every given in price, your quantity supply is going to respond lesser with Q1 and more, okay, at Q1 prime. Okay, when your supply is price elastic. Alright, so it's not new concept, it is just okay combining the two diagrams together. So I am going to move on to today's concept of going through exam topics. How is it going to be tested? Right? So the first one that I have for you and which will be tested today won't be in the notes. Please take notes for this. Okay, please take down notes in your book. It's not in the book, and it will be tested later. It's what we call the concept of price volatility. Okay, so how do we know price volatility is tested? Look out for keywords like sharp, significant, dramatic, okay, along the line. Okay, along the line. So long as it suggests that there is a sharp increase in price or sharp decrease in price. Okay, sharp increase or sharp decrease in price. Okay, but of course, they will tell you if sharp increase or sharp decrease in quantity, it can also be used the opposite. Okay, but the approach is the same. Okay, most of the time you're looking at sharp increase in price, not quantity. Okay, so whenever these few words come into the picture, you have to suspect that elasticity will be tested. Okay, and both PED and PES can come into the picture. Okay, so I'm going to show you two scenarios of how this is going to be tested. Okay, in an exam, in case study or essay, you're supposed to identify one of the two scenarios. Okay, so now let's entertain the idea of sharp rise in price. Okay, so when it's a sharp rise in price, we have to split it up in two halves. Okay, rise and sharp. So what causes a rise in price? What framework do we use? Remember we learned last week and the 2 weeks back. Okay, we learned demand and supply. Okay, so what could have caused your price to go up? A price will go up, okay, when there's a shortage. Agreed? And a shortage is created by increase in demand or a fall in supply. Is everyone following me? These two combinations is either an increase in demand or a fall in supply. This will lead to a shortage and an upward pressure on price. Okay, but it does not address sharp. It only address rise. So when sharp comes into the picture, you have to combine with an elasticity value. Okay, so PED and PES or PES has to be used. I use the word or. Okay, because the initial condition is important. You have to identify from the extract which is the Egypt or wet peaks factor. Either of these will be present. Then we know how to pair these two up together. Okay, so if this is Egypt factor, okay, we have to combine together with PES. Always the opposite. If this is a wet peaks factor or supply factor, we have to combine with PED. Okay? So I'm going to show you what do I mean by sharp rise. Okay, I'm going to show you the the diagram illustration, okay, of the two. Okay, using what we have learned over for the overview earlier on. This one you can understand. Good. No need to draw this. Okay, good. You can just understand will do. Alright, so just now, okay, we illustrated that, okay, for a given in demand, PES has to be inelastic, okay, to satisfy sharp rise in price. So now let's play around with these two supply curves. Supply inelastic, so supply elastic, and supply inelastic. Okay, it's the same as page 14 that I've shown you earlier on, this diagram. Okay, so now I'm going to insert two demand curves here. Okay, so demand curve 1, okay, tells us that this is the equilibrium, price, and quantity, okay, for all three diagrams. Now, I want you all to observe, don't blink. Okay, when there's an increase in demand, what is the effects on price? Okay, we can see that your price will undergo two different variations. Okay, so when there's an increase in demand, under different sets of supply curve, your price will undergo different degree of increasing. Do you see that? Okay, so under your inelastic supply curve, your price will experience a sharper increase in price than your elastic demand curve. Okay, so if we were to put into perspective, your quantity of your quantity will increase less than proportion, okay, as compared to your price for inelastic supply curve. Your quantity is going to increase more than proportion, okay, when you have a elastic supply curve. So this diagram is actually very comprehensive in showing you why is there a need to vary your PES. Okay, because only when your supply curve is significantly inelastic or steep, then we can illustrate a sharp rise in price as compared to a normal increase in price. Okay, so make sure this concept sinks into your head. Okay, so from the diagram perspective, okay, I'm just going to map this out quickly again. Okay, so the first combination that we have drawn earlier on is increase in demand and PES is less than 1. Okay, so make sure you draw your supply curve to be significantly inelastic. Okay, and when there's an increase in demand, okay, let's illustrate the diagram. P0, Q0. Okay, so when there's an increase in demand, we can see that your quantity, maybe I change this to a green color. Okay, your price will increase more than proportion to with respect to increase in quantity. Do you see that? The magnitude of your price increase exceeds the magnitude of your quantity. Okay? So the opposite also holds true. Okay, so this is scenario 1. Okay, scenario 2, okay, remember, scenario 2 will need to illustrate a rise in price which is illustrated by a fall in supply. Okay, let's draw a fall in supply. Okay, and we need to vary the gradient of your PED. Okay, vary the gradient of your PED. Let's draw this in green. Okay, to illustrate something new. Why am I not drawing straight? Alright, okay, so let's insert your demand curve. Okay, your demand curve don't need to be slope, or rather, your demand curve needs to be slope, okay, as steep as possible, so you can see this. Okay, so this is the initial price and quantity. And as a result of a fall in supply and PED being inelastic, okay, you can see that your price will increase more than proportion with respect to fall in quantity. Okay, it's always relative to the quantity. Okay, that's why you see a sharp increase in price. Okay, is everyone following me? So this is the second combination. Okay, fall in supply plus PED being inelastic. Then you have a sharp increase in price. So from exam perspective, you always have to look out for the Egypt and wet peaks factor. Either one of them will be present. And once you identify one of them, you have to automatically map it up with the corresponding supply curve. If you identify demand, you have to map it with PES. If you identify supply, map it with PED. So the determinants of PED and PES may or may not be present in the extract, may or may not, but they will always tell you the primary condition, okay, of an increase in demand or a fall in supply. So far so good. So there is also a trick question. So what happens if they want you to illustrate sharp increase in quantity? Sharp rise in quantity. Okay, so this one is hardly tested, but my H2 students will probably get this, okay, in one of your future questions. How do we illustrate a sharp increase in quantity? If you understood earlier concept, okay, you should be able to illustrate this. Okay, so let's go through together. Okay, this is hardly tested, but it's a quiz question for all of you. So how do we satisfy an increase in quantity? What must happen? What must happen to demand in order for quantity to go up? Demand must shift right or shift left? Okay, demand must increase. What about supply? Shift right or shift left? Good. So getting the first step is important. Okay, increase in your quantity must be satisfied with increase in demand or increase in supply. Okay, so in order for your quantity to increase significantly, sharp, okay, we have to pair these same PED and PES. So can you and we're going to do the same approach. We are going to map up this demand and demand to PES and supply to PED. Right? So if we were to use the earlier example, luckily I didn't draw this in vain. Increase in demand, right? Holding your supply elastic and inelastic. Which one will experience a sharper increase in quantity? Okay, so let me repeat my question. Okay, there is an increase in demand. So under which supply curve will reflect a greater increase in quantity? Supply elastic or supply inelastic? So now I'm no longer concerned about this. I don't want this anymore. Okay, I want to focus on this. Okay, so you can see that when there's an increase in demand, when your supply is elastic, then your quantity will increase more. Okay, if your supply is inelastic, quantity will increase less. Okay, so this kind of variations could happen as well. Okay, I pray to God it won't come out to harm you guys any soon. Okay, but if it does, okay, please refer to this lecture clip. Okay, because I made it a point to address that. Yeah. Okay, so this is a cancerous question that tests you on the other way. So remember, no matter how the question permutates, okay, make sure you split it in two halves. Okay, the first primary condition is identifying a rise and a fall. Okay, and it has to be satisfied with demand and supply conditions. Next, okay, if it's a sharp, okay, then we have to look at PED and PES. Okay, and we have to combine the two of them. Okay, demand with PES, supply with PED. Is everyone clear? Okay, this will come out next week again. Okay, it will come out in a different form. So everything that we are doing today is going to build towards next week. So make sure you really address that. If not, you're on your own. Okay, so I am going to move on to pricing strategy. Remember we did a recap on consumer expenditure and producer revenue earlier on. Okay, the area under your demand and supply curve, the equilibrium price and quantity will reflect your consumer spending and producer revenue. So today we will be using the same concept, okay, but we are concerned about producer revenue alone. Producer revenue. Okay, after this, okay, we'll go for the time practice really. Okay, so this one is for firm's producer perspective, is only applicable for PED. Okay, so when the question is asking you about how should firms price is good, they are asking you about firm's pricing strategy. The concept that is tested is firm's pricing strategy. Okay, so this is the only instance that we do not need a supply curve. Okay, so let me illustrate this quickly. Okay, so first of all, let's draw the two different types of demand curve. You can see that this is elastic and inelastic. Is everyone following me? So the question will ask, okay, how should a firm price is good? Okay, so when the question is asked like this, there's only two options for you. You have to lower or raise price. There's no other third option. Status quo is not an option. Okay? So, okay, when your good is deemed to be price elastic, okay, due to any of the PANT factor, maybe it takes up a high proportion of income, maybe there's a lot of substitute, and maybe there is it is not a necessity. How can we increase producer revenue? So first of all, okay, let us quickly identify an arbitrary point here. We can see that your this is your demand curve. Okay, so we can see that the initial price and quantity combination under your demand curve, okay, will reflect, okay, the revenue, okay, that is gained by the producer, right? If they sell at P0, Q0. So far, is everyone okay following me? So now let's observe what happens when you lower price. When you lower price from P0 to P1, okay, we can see that your quantity demanded of the good increases more than proportion, right? And your producer revenue will be the rectangle in green. So can you tell me what happens to producer revenue? Has it went up or went down or stayed the same? So the initial one was blue. Okay, the later one is green. With a fall in price, your quantity demanded increases more than proportion. Okay, and the area under your green rectangle will be the price times quantity of your producer, the new revenue. So my question is, what happened to the producer revenue? The blue is before, the green is after. Has it went up, went down, or stayed the same? Right, at least you can try to participate if you can. Okay, it helps you. Okay, but better than not typing. Okay, likewise for Joanne. Alright, so the boys, okay, pretty sharp. Okay, we can see that your producer revenue increased. Okay, from P0 Q0 to P1 Q1. Okay, so we are all about looking at the size of the rectangle, the area under your demand curve. So if your good is price demand elastic, PED is greater than 1, a firm should always strive to increase its price. Now, what should we do if the demand of the good is price inelastic? What should we do about price? Should we increase or lower price? Okay, let's use the same analogy. Okay, so let's start from P0, Q0. Okay, price times quantity will give you your initial revenue. Do you see that? So when there's an increase in price, okay, we see that your quantity demanded, I'm going to rub away this, okay, because it's not necessary anymore. Okay, your quantity demanded will fall less than proportion. Okay, and the new revenue will be the one in green. So what can we conclude about the producer revenue? Has it increased, decreased, or stayed the same? Type it out now. Okay, good, Elijah. Goes. Alright, the producer revenue has increased. Alright, so the green rectangle is bigger than the blue rectangle. Okay, let me repeat. The green rectangle is bigger than the blue rectangle. Okay, so it's very confusing. Okay, what I can recommend you, okay, is if you don't have the luxury of colors, okay, you can use A, B, C. Alright, so rectangle A, which is this, is shared by both before and after. Okay, but we can see that A plus B, okay, this is your total revenue before. Price change is A plus B. Total revenue after price change is A plus C. So far, are you all following me? So A remains unchanged. Okay, it's only B and C changes. So now, can you all tell me, okay, for the diagram on the right, which rectangle is bigger, C or B? Type it out now. C or B? Okay, so rectangle C is clearly bigger, right? So what is it trying to tell you is, as a result of an increase in price, quantity demanded goes down less than proportion. Okay, so the producer will lose rectangle B, but it will gain rectangle C as a result. Okay, so you can consider this approach if you find the colors a bit confusing. Okay, likewise, okay, okay, so the pricing strategy that the producer should use if you're, I'm so sorry, this one is lower price. Okay, so if your demand is price inelastic, okay, you should raise price. Okay, if your demand is price elastic, you should lower price. So it's the same analogy. Okay, let's use ABC again. Okay, especially if you find it confusing, okay, please follow me. Okay, so A, B, C. So can you all tell me the initial total revenue? What are the sum of rectangles? Initial, quickly. All of you type. Which are the rectangles that are captured? Initial. Okay, great, Alice. The initial will be price times quantity, right? P0 times Q0, right? How could it be AC? P0 times Q0 is A and B, Okay, the final. Okay, as a result of a fall in price from Q0 to Q1, quantity increase from Q0 to Q1, right? What is the final total revenue? Based on the diagram on the left. Okay, AC. So we can actually see that as a result of a fall in price, the producer will lose rectangle B and they will gain rectangle C. Okay, so this is the whole idea behind that. Okay, if you want to illustrate revenue change, you can use ABC as well. Okay, so to quickly sum up, okay, when PED is elastic, you should lower price. When PED is inelastic, you should raise price. Okay, doing the opposite will harm your business. Alright, so this is known as pricing strategy. Okay, in the future, we'll be learning non-pricing strategy. Non-pricing strategy revolves around changes in your demand. Okay, so this is a movement factor. Okay, or your PED is looking at the slope of your demand curve. Okay, so we'll recap on this next week. Make sure you don't forget. Okay, you must be able to identify the areas quickly. Alright, so for exam purpose, for today's practice, make sure you understand the usage of keywords such as all this and apply it, okay, with respect to price or quantity volatility. Okay, and you got to illustrate how should a firm price its own goods to maximize revenue. Okay, firm's pricing decision. So with this, okay, I have come to the end of the content sharing. Okay, we will move on to the time practice. So everyone, okay, please look out for your lesson folder. Okay, you should be seeing rising healthcare costs. Please type out if you see the same question. Rising healthcare costs. Rising healthcare costs. Okay, so the boys are already there. What about the girls? Lesson 4, J1 folder. Joanne? Alice? J1H2 folder. Okay, great, Alice. Joanne?
Yeah, can.
Rising healthcare costs. Okay, make sure you're doing the same one. Okay, so PED PES. Okay, you should be seeing this. Okay, so we are at lesson 4 folder. And rising healthcare costs. Okay, so I won't be addressing any questions until the time practice is done. Okay, it's not a difficult question. Okay, so you should be seeing one question alone. Okay, so just to confirm, okay, all of y'all see only one question. So with this, okay, I'm going to officially kickstart the time practice. You have 10 minutes. Okay, once you're ready, you can start doing it now. Right, great. That's it. Time's up. Stop writing. Thank you. Please turn on your webcam. Okay, we will finish strong in the last 15 minutes. So everyone, okay, please prepare your correction pen while I go through this together. Do you have your correction pen with you? So I have also activated the answer key in your respective folders. Okay, if you don't see that, you need to refresh. Okay, so as mentioned earlier on, okay, for the latecomers, okay, if today you will turn in your script on the spot, okay, after doing your correction before you leave the room. Okay, so I must receive your script before you leave this chat room. So let's look at the question together, okay, and take down corrections together. Using extract tool, explain why the price of healthcare is expected to rise sharply in the free market. Okay, so we actually see that the condition for what we have learned earlier on has came out, right? Rise sharply. Yes. Okay, so maybe I'll get one of y'all to try. Elijah, how did you approach this question?
I first stated like healthcare, like why its demand is price inelastic. I explained that it's a necessity for the terminally ill or the elderly.
Okay, so next.
Then after that, I state that in the abstract, Singapore is experiencing a rise in aging population.
Okay.
So as stated before, like cause for the elderly it's a necessity. Then demand for healthcare starts to increase.
Okay, so aging
Then
population. Yeah, I'm just copying the things down. The rest of y'all can look at it. Can look at what are. So it's a demand factor, right? Okay, so Egypt. Okay, which alphabet? Aging population. My question was which alphabet satisfy aging population?
P population.
Population. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
Then after that, in a free market, producers are free to determine the price of healthcare. So in this rise in demand, they'll decide to increase price due to price strategy.
Okay, great, thanks. So remember, okay, earlier on, okay, I shared with you guys a very specific approach. Okay, so you have to identify the initial factor. Okay, the primary condition, okay, for rise sharply is you must use demand and supply, and you have to pair it with PED PES. If you identify there is an increase in demand, you have to pair with PES. Okay, it's not a producer pricing strategy question. Okay, unfortunately, it's not. Okay, so stick to our discussed approach of, okay, so PES in this case, okay, you have to justify why is it lesser than 1. Right? Okay, so it falls nicely back to this diagram. Okay, the one on the left side. Okay, increase in demand, and you have to justify why your PES is inelastic. So just now, okay, you realize that, okay, Elijah brought up two related concepts. Demand and PED is inelastic. Okay, so these two cannot work well together. It can't work well together because when we look at PED, we are looking at ceteris paribus. You cannot look at the same increase in your demand. When you alter the slope of the demand curve, you cannot establish any shift and change in your demand. So remember, okay, when you shift one, okay, you cannot change the slope. Okay, you have to respect the rules of the game. So if you shifted one, you can only change the slope of the other. Okay, so please pen this down. If you change one of them, okay, it's a rightward shift or leftward shift. The other the other slope, the other part of the diagram, you have to tilt the slope. Yeah, you cannot be altering the slope of the curve that you have shifted. Okay, if not, ceteris paribus cannot be held. Okay, so the missing ingredient here is PES is lesser than 1. Okay, so this is option 1. If you choose option 2, okay, you stated the secondary condition, it has to be paired with what? A fall into your supply curve. Fall in your supply and your PED is lesser than 1. Okay, I agree healthcare could be a necessity. Then it will satisfy the second criteria here. Sharp increase in price. Okay, so I will show you in this extract how will both of these turn out to be okay. But it requires you to identify the primary condition correctly. Okay? So with this, okay, let's look at the answer. Okay, I've activated the answer key already. Okay, but you guys can join me in correction. If not, you can complete that later on. Okay, right after I've gone through. So you can see that okay, there's rapid aging population. Okay, so this is a demand factor, Egypt. Okay, like what Elijah has mentioned, this is a population factor. Okay, so the next part is to illustrate a rise, not a sharp. Okay, so the rise part you need to illustrate using PAP. Does anybody still remember what is PAP? Type it out, PAP. What is PAP? Price adjustment process. So with an increase in demand, this will lead to a shortage and an upward pressure on price. Alright, so now you have to identify a PES factor. PES factor, I'm very lenient. Okay, so you can list out any of the means factor so long as it satisfies the context of healthcare. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Okay, so number 1, okay, we can play around with the alphabet M. Okay, so the sharp rise in price could be due to low factor mobility. Okay, because of healthcare workers requiring a very specific skill set. Okay, it takes time to train a healthcare worker. Therefore, your supply curve is price inelastic. And this key phrase I forgot to bold, very important. Okay, you have to illustrate that price will rise sharply. Okay, price will rise sharply, okay, as compared to an increase in quantity. Okay, the extent of your price increasing is more than your quantity. So if you have drawn a diagram, good. If not, it's also fine. The question does not call for a diagram. So if you didn't draw a diagram, I will allocate the balance last mark from the diagram, okay, to your PES illustration. Okay. So are there any other PES factors we can consider? Okay, there are a lot. Okay, it's just whether you are looking hard enough. So as highlighted from the earlier class, he mentioned that manpower is a problem. Manpower shortage tells you what? Okay, you can either consider spare capacity. Right? Manpower shortage means that your healthcare workers are overworked already. Okay, therefore, okay, hospitals cannot increase quantity supplied, okay, of hospital service for every given increase in price. Can play around with the manpower word, okay, with spare capacity. And number of producers possibly could, okay, but on hindsight, okay, spare capacity works really well here. Okay, so you can consider manpower and site manpower here. Okay, and you can relate to lack of spare capacity. Okay, due to manpower shortage. Okay, and this is the important key phrase. Okay, there will be a sharp rise in price, followed with a less than proportional increase in quantity. So if this is option 1, okay, is everyone following me of option 1? This is the combination that is required. Diagram is not necessary. So option 2, like what Elijah has mentioned, okay, if you identify PED being inelastic, then you have to pair with a supply factor. So identifying the supply factor, the fall in supply is crucial. So you can tweak around. Okay, so if for the manpower point, we can tweak it into a supply factor, but we have to hold PED, okay, ceteris paribus. We cannot shift PED. Okay, we can only play around the slope with PED. Okay, so this can be perceived as a wet peaks factor. Okay, manpower shortage, right? Okay, so input price will go up. Okay, because of higher production costs. Okay, labor shortage will lead to higher production costs, higher wage costs. Okay, a shortage and an upward pressure on price. Okay, and like what Elijah has mentioned, combine this with PED is inelastic. Okay, due to the nature of healthcare being a necessity, then you can see here. Fall in supply, demand being inelastic, the rise in price, okay, will be more significant than the quantity demanded or quantity falling. So if you draw the diagram, the whole idea is to make sure you draw inelastic. If not, okay, your diagram will be ambiguous. You cannot show the sharp rise in price. Okay, so make sure this is greater than this. Okay, likewise for the earlier diagram. You see that? Okay, the magnitude of the price always exceeds the quantity. Okay, so this is PANT, the N factor. So I am very, very concerned about the alphabets. That's why I keep asking you guys to list the alphabet. Once you guys identify the concept, okay, the concept that I covered about price volatility, okay, it is a combination of either option 1 or option 2. The next layer will be identifying which are the factors in place. Okay, is it Egypt? If it's an Egypt factor, it's a demand factor, you pair it with PES. Pair with mints. Egypt pair with mints. Wet peaks will pair with PED. Okay, so this is the combination to adopt. So the last thing, okay, that I want to emphasize on, whenever question states sharp rise, okay, you should avoid this. Okay, you should avoid illustrating double shifts. Okay, this is a very nasty thing that I've seen in a lot of my year 2s. Okay, double shifts, increase in demand or fall in supply satisfy the criteria of a rise in price. Okay, you can see that. Okay, this is the initial price quantity. Okay, and this is the final price and quantity. So from diagram perspective, there's nothing wrong. Okay, but from the illustration perspective, this is a sustained increase. It's not a sharp rise in price. Like I say, sharp rise in price will always play around with, okay, option 1 or option 2. Okay, it cannot be a combination of 2 shifts. Okay, so with this, I hope, okay, I have established some ground rules moving ahead for elasticity based questions, sharp based questions. Okay, so remember to revise this. And with that, okay, if you have any questions for me, okay, please stay back and ask me. If not, I would expect your script to be done with correction right now, okay, and turn in your scripts immediately before you leave the room. All right?